we're going to end our symposium with our final lightning talks. To present our speakers, it's a pleasure to ask Ms. Emily Lowe, the Senior Vice President of the Hudson Insurance Group, to join me. Emily?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to introduce the final set of lightning talks. Up first is a presentation by Ms. Priscilla Cole of Vantage Risk on the fly terror exposure aggregations with H3 Hexagons and Snowflake.
Thank you. My name is Priscilla Cole, and I am a Geospatial Engineer at an insurance and reinsurance startup company called Vantage Risk. We're going to learn about hexagons. So what is reinsurance? Insurance companies need coverage for themselves, especially in disaster scenarios. So think about all the things that we've heard about today: hurricane, flood, fire, and terror is another example. All of these things have a geospatial nature about them, where they accumulate into hotspots. So insurance companies get rid of this risk by chopping up their portfolios into these little bitty parts and selling them off, and that's the reinsurance market. But as reinsurers, we have to be careful that we don't re-aggregate those same geographic hotspots that everybody else is fighting so hard to divide up and dump off of their books. So to talk about this problem, I'm talking faster than I think I thought I was. Hopefully it will go on. There, okay. So why is this such a hard problem? We get data in from all over the place. We work with many, many brokerages that represent hundreds of insurance clients. And so they send to us databases of their entire portfolio. So those are databases containing all the different locations of all their buildings, all their assets. They come in, and we have to track those along with all of our own terms, like have the underwriters bound a policy? Are they still considering it? Are we evaluating it? We have to run all that through catastrophe models and operate them through APIs, and then we have to get all that data back and to put it into our big data warehouses. It's an enormous engineering feat just to accomplish all of that. And then once you get all that data back into the data warehouse, then what do you do with it? Like, how do you actually make decisions about your portfolio, figure out what's relevant, to figure out what the client is doing to your portfolio, to make sure that you're not, re-aggregating those hot spots, and to figure out how to manage all of that. I love this graphic of like the stacking stones up here. This is how I think about all of this, because it's just this massive data exercise. So for terror specifically, we run these large location data sets through terror models. I've got some examples up here. This is an example of a Lowe's RDS scenario. So imagining setting off a bomb in Rockefeller Center. That's how that would look to be modeled. And then we use hexagons to accomplish a lot of the hard work of filtering out model scenarios, of trying to stack the different scenarios on top of each other, stack our clients on top of each other, and to figure out how each of those are contributing to those scenarios, like the one that you see in the picture there. And through the data warehouse and through Hexagon technology, we're able to chug through, in some cases, hundreds of millions of records, and to do it very, very quickly, and to use, like the data warehouse that we use actually has Hexagon technology built in. We don't have to do anything extra to get that. And we can combine that, the locations, with our own contract information, our own underwriting decisions, and compile all that together very, very quickly to make decisions. I put some code up here. I hope you're not afraid of code. I wanted to show you what it actually looks like to do what I'm talking about. So here I have some data loaded into my data warehouse. And that data is not spatial data. It's a flat table. It has lat longs. I'm generating those hexagons on the fly in the data warehouse at that first green arrow up there. And then once those hexagons are on there, that's my point of doing all the additional work down below. So I'm doing things like rank sort and join and pivot. The hexagons then become what I do all that work on. And why would you do this? This is replacing a lot of standard geospatial workflows that people know, like spatial joins, intersects, buffers. I don't have to do any of that because I'm just leveraging what's already in that Hexagon library. So after we do all this hard work, we aggregate, we pull things together, it leaves a lot of more time to make underwriting decisions, to figure out how to price things, to balance our portfolio, to do all of that good work that's really hard to make decisions about. And we can get that very quickly and get it on a map for our people. So again, I'm Priscilla Cole. This is my LinkedIn page. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. For our next presentation, we have Mr. Patrick Ellis from NGA in conflict or disaster, population data for mitigating harm to civilians.
Hello, I'm Patrick Ellis, and I'm the Senior GEOINT Officer for Human Geography at the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, or NGA. First, I'd like to thank AGS for this opportunity, where I'm excited to highlight a set of data that we are quite proud of, not only because of its capability, but because it's available to the public and supports geospatial analysis for risk modeling and monitoring, providing us with a base for understanding populations and their geography. We call it LandScan. First, LandScan Global is a gridded data set representing a 24-hour ambient or unwarned population. In other words, the normal probability of people being in a cell of space over the course of a day. You might ask, why not use census data? Well, because census data tends to show where people live rather than where they are, where they filled out their paperwork, not where they are. As an example, us being here today at Columbia University, we wouldn't show up in the decennial census. The chance that we're here today does show up in LandScan. LandScan can be used for any activity requiring accurate population information. Without understanding where people live, we cannot model the risks of climate change, conflict, or disasters, or calculate how much support is needed once they strike. For NGA, this data might inform decision makers and warfighters in their planning to prevent harm to civilians or to provide support to humanitarian assistance and disaster response. We might also use it to identify the impacts on civilian populations from other actors. On June 6th of this year, an explosion causing significant damage to the Karakova Dam released a flood of water impacting over 37,000 people. Using Landsat imagery, NGA was able to work with our partners across the government to identify the areas impacted, and we used LandScan data to understand the scale of the impact on the population. As you saw on the opening slide, we have a global coverage of LandScan, and we call it LandScan Global. It has a resolution of about 1 square kilometer. The Ukraine example used a higher resolution version we call LandScan HD. Instead of a kilometer, each cell is only 100 meters wide, 100 times finer resolution. This building, rather than Columbia University. As populations continue to urbanize into higher densities, higher resolution data is needed to understand potential impacts at the neighborhood and building scale. LandScan HD is currently only available over select countries, but we're working with our partners at Oak Ridge National Lab to develop a global LandScan HD layer. So how is this data made? First, please forgive me, as I know one of the initial developers of LandScan is here with us today. So please excuse me if I butcher it too much. Our friends at Oak Ridge, ORNL, they create this data using high-resolution imagery, open source information, and their exquisite supercomputing capabilities. They analyze these data to create a probability surface for population that they normalize against census data. In other words, figure out where people might live and pour your population data into those places. Not only is this capability exciting, but as noted before, it's also free and available to the public. Educators, students, researchers, government, and industry all have access to Landscan population data that can support their needs and increase the potential for greater collaboration and understanding. To download the full list of Landscan products, please visit the site on the slide, and if you have any questions, you can contact us at populationdata@nga.mil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next presentation is by Dr. Bonnie McLean of the Global Impact Assessment, the impact of climate change on our built infrastructure.
All right, giddy up. I'm a geospatial analyst and storyteller, grounded in first principles. And I realized, working with infrastructure and the built infrastructure across the globe, that we don't fly over infrastructure. We kind of walk among it, and we bear the implications of that. And this is a favela in Brazil, and these informal settlements are growing in number, over 2 billion of these, as they're absorbing the excessive population that's reaching us and coming out and being impacted by climate change. And when you get this close, you can see there's an urban form. This is a formal settlement, just like we would see hovering over any town. And we can go in, we can look at trees, we can look at the shapes of buildings, and we can make conversations, and we can kind of figure out what's going on in these communities. And we can now do the same things in favelas and informal settlements by looking at patterns, not just looking at parts. Right? The parts might look the same or look different, but the patterns are very telling. Martin Fleischman has a Pythonic package called MOMPI that looks at urban form, urban morphometrics. So you look at these building units, the way a building sits on a land, and you can start looking at similarities of an observable unit and look at clustergrams and start making some kind of inference about what the communities look like. And this is a Jupyter Lab notebook just kind of showing how you download the data, load it all in, and you pick a location. You can pick a location anywhere in the world where there is good satellite coverage, where there's a good kind of dichotomy and variety. Like right here, this is a informal settlement showing you what the road networks look like. So you can see how the community is built, because these things are self-realized. An informal settlement is built from within. There's no top-down systematic development. Here we can look at where the buildings are located, how close they're located, the sizes, their irregularity, how they sit on the land. And this is important with climate change, because you have to be able to access these communities when they are in need, and you also need to mitigate some of the climate implications. Here we're looking at a lot of the connectivity, the way that the buildings are situated also depend on how you can access them, the actual size. Beyond the building footprint, which is 2D, you can now go in 3-dimensionally and get a glimpse of what these neighborhoods look like in these informal settlements and these favelas. And this information can be very important when we're trying to figure out how these things build up simultaneously in congruence. And when you get all the data, the first, second, third quartile variables, then you start looking at clustergrams, because like sort of sorts with like. And now you're going to be able to get sort of the pattern that I was referring to, a sort of fingerprint of that area. What you see on the right is the result of the clustergram. What you see on the left is I pulled it over into QGIS, so I could kind of see where the concordance was, and it's very high. You can actually observe these patterns in the satellite environment and say a lot about the structure, which is important when you see these favelas. They vary in topography. So here you see there's a lot of mudslides in this area, so now you know how to access the community, you know the building structure, you know the likelihood of something that might slide down a mountain. You can also look in these areas up at the density, because they're very, very dense environments, living environments, and there's a risk of infectious disease, respiratory, cardiovascular diseases are being assessed and monitored here in live time using biomass, the Brazil database. And if you look here, you can also even look how the land use has changed, because you can go in and see that was 1985, and boom, look at us in 2022. There's a lot of change in the land formation. We can kind of try to get ahead of it to see where we need to mitigate and offset the climate change. Here's the carbon being produced in the area. The darker areas obviously are the highest tonnage of carbon. How do we offset the carbon? Can we go in there? Can we build? Can we look and see how these environments are impacting the local area? But the good news is they all came together, and they had a COVID dashboard in this favela, which is the biggest one in Rio de Janeiro. They can come together collectively as communities and reflect kind of what we do in our formal environments. If you're interested in these sort of stories, you can just come over here, because the story in more depth and more context is things that I cover in my social profile.
Thank you. For our final presentation, Ms. Annika Sutton, the Youth Mappers Environment. Hopefully I said your name correctly.
It's Annika.
Annika, I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me.
Hello. Big thank you to AGS for having me here speaking today, and big thank you to all of you guys for sitting through one last lightning talk for our closing reception. Today I'm going to be sharing with you just a couple of projects that members of the Youth Mappers community have been working on in the realms of climate justice, climate change, and combating inequalities. Very brief background on me. I'm a recent graduate of the GW Geography Department. During my time at GW, I worked as president of the Youth Mappers chapter, as well as a member of the Youth Mappers Validation Hub. And I'm very grateful to be continuing my career with Youth Mappers post-graduation, working as their regional ambassador for the Americas. Anyone not familiar with Youth Mappers, it was an organization founded in 2014. It consists of student-led chapters that utilize OpenStreetMap, an open source mapping platform mentioned by previous speakers. And they use OSM to define and change their communities through mapping it. The aim of Youth Mappers is to empower and provide students with the resources to do this work. It truly is an international organization with over 5,000 student mappers in 370 chapters across 72 countries. These numbers have probably gone up even in the weeks since I created this presentation. And all these students volunteer their time to map communities based on local data they've collected or through satellite imagery. So the first example I'm going to discuss focuses on rural households in Ghana. Youth Mappers chapters at Texas Tech University, as well as the University of Cape Coast in Ghana, collaborated together to determine how to identify which households are the most vulnerable in areas generally accepted to be food insecure. It's accepted that 70% of rural households in Ghana struggle with food insecurity of some type. However, there's a gap in the knowledge that helps local actors target specific households to get aid out. And what about these specific households makes them more susceptible to food insecurity than other ones in the area? So students at both universities collaborated using household demographic data and household dietary diversity scores to create heat maps that displayed the prevalence of food insecurity in their study areas. This work shows that food insecurity in rural areas is actually more prevalent than expected, going from an estimated 70% to 82% in actuality, especially for households that have little access to land and livestock. And this micro-level analysis will be used to provide more effective intervention in these areas. For my second example, I'm going to discuss a more domestic example here in Arizona in the US. Youth Mappers at Arizona State University worked to close a gap in mapping data for mobile home and RV owners, especially in urban areas where these long-term residents are often left out of mapping and other analysis. When it comes to heat-related deaths, mobile home owners are especially vulnerable, making up nearly 30% of heat-related deaths, but only 5% of housing within the study area of Maricopa County. So students wanted to know, why is this? Why were people in these types of housing disproportionately suffering from this aspect of the climate crisis? So in order to answer this question, students pulled data from the Maricopa County Public Health Department and overlaid it with information about access to utility assistance, housing type, and it should be noticed that every RV shown in this photo was mapped by a volunteering student mapper. It was previously unmapped and now we know that it's there. So this work revealed that mobile home parks are usually high density, they lack proper construction, they lack vegetation, many are ineligible for utility assistance, and this leads to an extremely disproportionate number of deaths by housing type. Filling the gap in this data is hopefully going to lead to the development of better solutions from local actors. All of the information that I've just discussed, I was pulled from the recent Youth Mappers publication, Open Mapping Towards Sustainable Development Goals. The listed chapters have very similar content to what I've discussed, and I definitely recommend checking it out. It's available on a couple online sources if you're interested. And then this is just a link to my LinkedIn account, but more importantly, this is also a QR code that will link you to all the Youth Mappers social media. This is a great resource, especially for students, on OpenStreetMap, JOSM, other open source tools, as well as up-to-date news on what Youth Mappers chapters are currently doing, both in the US and abroad. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Emily, and all of your presenters. And now I ask Chris Tucker and Marie Price to come to the stage and give us some conclusionary remarks and announce the theme of next year's symposium. Chris and Marie?
Woo. Okay, you made it to the end. It's always like drinking from a fire hose. This is the end of Geography Awareness Week. Next week is the Thanksgiving holiday where we give gratitude. And I hope that wherever you are in the next week, maybe if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, you take a time to, when you're at a dinner table or a breakfast table, share with whoever you're with a story about something you learned this week, a new way of looking at the world, important information. That's how we build our connections, and also how we anticipate that you are loyal and come back and join us in this strategic dialogue over many years. Now is also my time to show gratitude for the people that have helped us along the way. Obviously, we couldn't do this without the support of first the Earth Institute at Columbia University.
Climate School.
Pardon me?
Climate School.
And the Climate School. I was going to say that. You jumped on my line there. Then we have some key supporters, the Fund for the City of New York, OCG, USGIF, and Youth Mappers. Woohoo! We have wonderful sponsors. We're grateful to Esri, Iron Eagle, Banna Solutions, Black Cape, Trimble, AAG, Bernstein, Crunchy Data, National Geographic, Pixel, Planet, Taylor Institute, and Verisk. Thank you very much for supporting us. And just a reminder, we also have our teachers here on Saturday morning. That's tomorrow. The fun continues, and we have our workshop in a new location, but that's in your program, and we'll see you there. We thank our corporate angels, but most importantly, this event is a heavy lift. You've been fed and stimulated for the last 2 days, and we couldn't do it without the dedication of the AGS staff. So John Konarski, James Mallinson, can you step away from the computer? Come on out. This is where the, Ivana Maori Mora, come on, stand up. Elodie Nix, where are you, Elodie? All right. It's a small but mighty team, and we are so grateful for all the work you do. All right, now I turn it over to Chris Tucker for an exciting announcement.
Well, thank you. So first of all, give yourselves a huge round of applause. For sticking it out. You're still here. Thanks so much again for taking time out of your busy, busy lives and coming here and sharing one brain together in this room for a day and a half of stimulating discussions. I hope you learned something. I agree. Hopefully this leads to some interesting conversation at your Thanksgiving. So thank you to you. Next year's theme is going to be cooperation and conflict in a changing climate. In partnership with the Climate School, right? this is the boogeyman. This is the 800-pound gorilla. This is the big thing. Climate is going to be in our themes for years. But how we view it each year is going to be different. So this year, hazard, risk, and finance. But next year, we're really going to focus at that global and regional scale of what are the forms of cooperation that we can either dust off and reuse that already exist, or new innovations and institutions, organizations, behaviors that allow us to cooperate to overcome the perennial forms of conflict that separate all of us as humans on this finite planet. So we're starting the program committee immediately. If you want to be on it, let us know. I mean, you may not want to be on it, but we'd love your ideas. If you've got ideas of amazing speakers, if you've got ideas of organizations that you think should be represented because they're doing amazing work, please reach out to us. We really value your input. And most importantly, save the date. So pull out your phone, pull out the calendar. It's actually going to be on same Thursday and Friday, November 21st and 22nd, I believe, of next year. So just put it in your calendar now, and do me a favor, go home and tell 10 of your friends to put it in their calendar also. We know everybody's got competing priorities, and we'd love to have you and your colleagues to come back here next year and join us. With that said, I would like all of you to stand up right now. Give another round of applause to yourselves.